In a world where the USSR and its Warsaw Pact won the Cold War, spreading all the way to France, and the United States of America collapsed into 11 different and opposing states, communism has become the dominant ideology coming into the 20th century. Only naturally, therefore, communism has also gotten a strong foothold in Africa, with the People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia being one of its champions. With a close cooperation with the Warsaw Pact, we've become a major player in the region, but communism has far from saved us from our internal issues, originating all the way back from Italian colonization and earlier. In Eritrea, a painful conflict is being fought against its insurrectionists. In our countryside, the possibility of famine is spreading panic, and all these issues has thrown the government into infighting. There are the party loyalists, the anti-Soviet wing, and the Derg, our powerful military clique. They would all clash together in this year's Workers' Party Convention, the most important political meeting in our nation. The first area of contention was that of the Eritrean issue. After long discussions, the government loyalists were able to adopt their ideas of a united nation as the party line, just as expected by most analysts. But from this point on, to everyone's surprise, the loyalists would lose control over the Congress. And in foreign policy, the internationalists saw the most support, seeking to abandon the stagnating Soviets, replacing it with cooperation with African socialists instead. This leaves the last issue of land reforms, where the Congress would take a turn for the worse. Because instead of the loyalists or internationalists being able to secure overall support in the convention, it was the Derg that got the most support in the question, seeing how land reforms have always failed. And this caused massive chaos as the convention concluded undecisive, half the president's cabinet resigned, and the prospects of a military coup shot through the roof. Fearing for his life, the president would attempt to simply flee the crisis, but on his way to boarding his private jet, an assassin swiftly ended his plan of escape. The assassin wasn't just anyone, but a covert operative from the Crown Council who were exiled in the communist coup d'etat of 1974. The tables have now completely turned, while the communists scramble to appoint the vice president as new president and attempt to calm down the situation. The Crown Council has gone to work. Declaring its return from exile, the council members burst into the National Congress, declaring its institutions defunct with no one stopping them. Soon the vice president had already stepped down, which followed the proclamation of a transition government by the Crown Council and underground democratic movements. And so in the matter of some months, the seemingly stable communist government of Ethiopia has completely collapsed, seeing the rise of monarchist and democratic movements from its ashes. With the transition government immediately going to work, the legacy of socialism will be removed, even being so thorough as to remove its propaganda in state textbooks. But this, of course, isn't their most important work. What actually matters is that we return to tranquility with a legitimate and stable government. In order to get true legitimacy, a referendum was held for the people of Ethiopia. Either the return of the King of Kings and the Solomonic dynasty, or a republic, one founded on true democracy, not what the communists had. After a long day of voting, the votes were all counted, and to the provisional government's surprise, the people voted for a monarchy with the narrowest of margins possible. But not so fast, as with the provisional government mostly being composed of moderate socialists and a wide range of other democratic movements, they decided in an emergency meeting to defy the results in the name of democracy. This would be the last straw to break the little stability left, because as the news of the decision spread throughout the country, monarchist loyalists rose up in rebellion, with much of the armed forces joining their side. In less than a month, the monarchist forces had occupied much of the nation, leaving the few democratic divisions and its government in the capital fighting for its survival. Despite being completely surrounded and assaulted from all sides by relentless monarchist offensives, all hope is not lost. In Addis Ababa, we see almost total support for our side, as the capital was one of the only places voting resoundingly in favor of democracy. With this support and a larger weapons stockpile compared to the monarchists, we can begin training 3 additional divisions. With the enemy also continuing their attacks despite our easily defendable terrain, they are eating up their own reserves without realizing. Soon enough they were even forced to halt their offensives as many of their divisions were only around 50% strength. This allows us to concentrate our own forces and dare to stage a counterattack. Not falling into the same terrain trap as the Monarchists, we conducted the offensive in the southern lowlands, where we used the gap in their front together with the fact that they hadn't captured all the states yet to surprise encircle and destroy one of their divisions. But from this vulnerable position we had to retreat back to the highlands to help with its defenses. Still, the operation was a great success as we've inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy with minimal losses on our side. After reorganizing our forces and deploying our 3 extra divisions, we restarted our offensive actions. With higher ambitions this time, we first moved west to reach the Sudanese border, then turned 180 degrees to move towards Somaliland, which we also easily reached since we could concentrate our forces while they couldn't. This has created a massive encirclement of the Monarchists in the south. With 5 divisions being trapped, it took a long time to defeat them all, but being already low on supply beforehand, it was nothing impossible. So eventually we could start an offensive to the north, now with a stronger army than theirs. Obviously this led to quick breakthroughs and advancements, reaching all the way back to Eritrea and the Red Sea. Together with even more encirclements, the monarchist front collapsed. As the Crown Council once again fled the country, we declared victory in the civil war. From completely surrounded, we turned the monarchists' large forces and vast territorial control into their biggest weakness, securing a democratic future for Ethiopia. But the struggles are far from over. With the almost 1-year-long war, what was previously only rumors of famine have turned very real very fast. If nothing is done immediately, all of society risks to collapse. There is even already a lack of food in some rural areas. So even if our transition government rather sit down to draft a new democratic constitution, we don't have such luxuries and we need to focus all our effort on this famine. Starting a massive effort of disaster prevention, we will spend substantial government funds to relieve the situation. But as we aren't a prosperous nation with high government income, this won't be enough. So while it definitely hurts our international standing, we will request aid from the world. With it responding with generousness, as democracies and anti-monarchists both near and far sent what aid they could spare, the worst risks have been alleviated. What remains to fix is the underlying issues that created this situation in the first place, and to solve it we need some political maneuvering. During the Civil War, the Workers' Party had already been abolished, with many of their more moderate politicians joining our democratic front. The Derg military faction still remains though, and continues to oppose any kind of land reform. So to both allow us to fix the issue and end the National Bolshevist Derg, we arrested their members for high treason. With the political situation around land reforms fixed, the actual reforms could follow. While it certainly strengthens the communists, it is a necessary step to save our nation. This leaves us with one last change to make sure famines can never occur again, and that is to grant autonomy and decentralize the state, which allows every region to conduct their agricultural system that is the most effective in their climates. So finally the possibility of famine is gone and we can return to the real job of the transition government, creating a true Ethiopian democracy. As the communist institutions and the Crown Council have been destroyed already, we can move on with dissolving the caretaker parliament and create a new one. In accordance with this, the Meke Mekonnen and his caretaker government announced the promised elections, this time without anti-democratic alternatives. After a short campaign, the election concluded with the centrist Oromo People's Congress winning it, being able to form a government with the support of smaller liberal New Democrat and ethnic parties. Focusing mainly on economic development, a much needed area of development, the new government started its work. In contrast to the previous communist planning, a capitalist approach was taken as a big privatization effort was initiated. Starting with infrastructure privatization, it will allow for far less government spending, hopefully making our nation more attractive to invest in. Continuing with selling off our state corporations, we will foster competition and growth, copying the success model which has driven growth in Nigeria. The last substantial part of the privatization plans was selling off and redistributing state farmland, following in the footsteps of the previous agricultural reforms. With the political strength of the government growing, as stability is back over 50% and an almost full cabinet is seeing our political power grow, we dare start dreaming for a much better future for Ethiopia. We are even seeing investments into otherwise luxury subjects like scientific research, putting us ahead of our African neighbors. But to actually cement this dream into reality, we need one final democratic reform. A brand new constitution that isn't based on old communist or monarchist foundations, but that is built up completely with true democracy in mind. After weeks of planning and discussion, it was adopted as the new law of the lands. While massively reforming most areas of governance and politics, maybe the most important change was regarding our military. No longer will a political army like the Derg be allowed. From now on, the military will only serve under the Republic and its democracy. Simultaneously, the military was strengthened with the deployment of more divisions and more general restructuring. Because hidden in a small clause in the new constitutions lies wording that our new Ethiopia should act as a beacon of freedom in Africa, which means spreading it to the nations still suffering under communism and other forms of dictatorship, something a strong army is needed for. So we will begin building up the greatest military in Africa. Initially putting a lot of focus on our infantry, both regarding the training of our soldiers to create an elite force, but also using our scientific hubs for better equipment. We will, however, soon turn to motorized development as well, because compared to many other armies on the continent, we don't produce or field any mechanized or armored equipment. Plan Beacon will still begin before any enter production, because with 250,000 men deployed and trained, at least the first operations of the plan can be executed. It starts against our despotic neighbor of Djibouti, whose population has been oppressed for far too long. With tensions mounting across the world, not many will bat an eye if we break some international treaties for the benefit of African freedom. Crossing the border into the small nation, we quickly encircled the capital, and with less than 30 casualties for our forces, the despotic government was forced to capitulation, with us annexing its lands and liberating its people. Keeping up our momentum, we started preparing a much larger invasion of Somalia against this military junta, initiating it with an incursion into Somaliland. Thanks to the political situation in the area, we were able to reach the port of Berbera with little conflict against the Central Somali military. But as we started meeting their forces, we launched an offensive straight towards their capital, led by our mountaineers. Despite the flat terrain, we were able to break through the Somali defenses and even reach the East African coast, splitting the thin nation in two. After about a week of fighting in Mogadishu, the capital fell to our forces, and with that, the Somali government capitulated. Annexing its lands, just like with Djibouti, we find ourselves having united the Horn of Africa. It will take some time to reduce resistance and expand compliance and freedom in this new land, but through these two first operations, we have at least shown Africa and our people that fighting for freedom is worth it. And this is incredibly important for morale, because the next nation we seek to save from communism, Sudan, doesn't stand alone. It's a part of the worldwide non-alignment pact centered in the Republic of Cuba, which includes the Congo, Zambia and Tunisia in Africa. In preparation for such a major conflict, we started training more divisions to double our army size and started production of light tanks for our new armored brigades. There wouldn't be much more preparations though. Our 22 divisions in training wouldn't even have time to deploy before our invasion had to start. Because Sudan and its allies are in this very moment marching north along the Nile into Egypt. If Cairo falls, our chances of liberating Sudan get slashed, so we must intervene straight away. So, in the most justifiable war yet, we attack the international non-alignment pact to save Egypt. Focusing our mountaineers in the north to reach Port Sudan, we will hopefully stop too many non-African enemies to reinforce. While our main army started the march towards the capital region in central Sudan. With the majority of the Sudanese army fighting in Egypt, we didn't meet much resistance, and that which we did meet was mainly Congolese forces moving north. So, using the element of surprise, Khartoum was captured with little conflict. But as the surprise wore off, our offensive successes slowed down. Still, keeping up at least some advances, the rest of Khartoum's outskirts was secured, and with us advancing westwards towards Dongola, the Sudanese government fled in exile to Congo, as their invading army in Egypt had lost all contacts with it. Using this chaotic situation for our enemy, we continued the push in the north towards the only enemy port along the Red Sea left. With Egypt initiating a major counter-offensive at the same time, the mishmash of enemy forces were easily encircled and eventually all destroyed. Even more encirclements were seen in the area only some days later as we pushed the total casualties of the non-alignment pact closer and closer to 500,000. We would reach this milestone by continuing the fight into western Sudan, fighting against a coalition of Congolese, Zambian and Cuban forces. After several successful battles, we arrived to the Congolese border encircling over 20 divisions in Darfur. While defeating these divisions, our diplomats set out to find a way to defeat Congo, because with our small border any invasion would be impossible. What they did was to send out an open invitation to all democratic nations of Africa to form the African Freedom Pact and together fight for the freedom of all of Africa. Altogether, 13 nations took up our call for action, including the military powerhouse of Nigeria, the Egyptian government we just saved, and our southern liberal friends in Kenya. So with brand new allies, brand new possibilities present themselves, and we will be able to significantly step up Plan Beacon, with an offensive along southeastern Africa to unite with our new southwestern allies. Let the liberation begin. After 2 years of liberalizations across the continent, we now stand before the most important battle yet. With the non-alignment pact having flooded the Congo with a huge coalition army, the only way forwards is for us to cut them off from their port access, dooming them to complete defeat. Assembling all our elite mountaineers and new light tank brigades, we thoroughly planned the small attack into Matadi. Initiating the offensive and force attacking with the mountaineers, we were able to advance before their plenty of divisions could reinforce, leading to a surprisingly quick victory and even the liberation of the Angolan port of Cabindan. Keeping up the offensive as the enemy forces are increasingly panicked, we slowly but surely advanced towards the Congolese capital, and eventually Kinshasa fell to our forces, spelling the end for Congo. This puts all the enemy coalition forces without supply and no chance at returning home, so we started simply mowing them down. After a quarter year of fighting, we had reached all the way to Zambia, capitulated it and the Congolese government, and destroyed every single last one of the enemy divisions in the area, going from 1.5 million casualties to almost 4. We would increase it with another 1.5 million as the non-alignment pact had tried to invade our nation by naval invasion while we were in the Congo, only to be obliterated once more. Thus, with the non-alignment pact may be left with less than 1 million deployed manpower across their 11 remaining members, and with Castro having been replaced as leader of Cuba, it looks like the alliance could collapse at any moment. While waiting for this inevitable collapse, we continued our plan Beacon, turning it to the south against the remaining communist and the apartheid regime in South Africa. Malawi was the first to fall, followed by Zimbabwe, then Mozambique and Swaziland, following shortly after. With the fall of the South African capital and massive protests in support of our invasion across the nation, our liberation of the country was surprisingly easy despite the on paper large SAF force. So with the south liberated, leaving only parts of western and northern Africa left, confident in our ability to finish Plan Beacon, we declared war on all the remaining oppressed nations. Quickly blitzing Libya, who has been in a civil war for several years at this point, we defeated Tunis, the last non-alignment pact nation left in Africa. Keeping up the momentum with our light tanks, Algeria, the largest African communist nation left, soon capitulated. Seeing similar success in West Africa thanks to Nigerian help, soon enough the only nation left was Morocco. Defeating them just as fast as the other with our light tanks, Plan Beacon of Freedom has succeeded. With the collapse of the non-alignment pact, we've been able to reorganize the occupied lands and, just like in the rest of Africa, establish liberal democratic government free from oppression and communism. So, with Africa united under freedom, I want to thank you for watching today's video. With this being the last one for this year, I also wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'll see you in the next video.